Hey everybody, Chris here from 3-Day Weekend. I got a good one for you today. 2015 Chevy Cruze. We're going to do the head gasket in it today. I was working on the turbo, had bad turbo, we put it all back together, and I had awful smoke coming out the back. Turns out it wasn't just a turbo. See that exhaust port on number 1? See how it's wet? 2 is dry, 3 is dry, 4 is dry. That's a bad sign. So we have a bad head gasket. Actually, I pressure tested the system through the coolant, and you can actually hear coolant coming out through the head gasket into that cylinder. Ignore this turbo. That was from the last video. I was just doing some testing with it. Check out the other one and you can see how to get that off. So if you're anything like me, you want it done right the first time, so you have to do it a second time. That's why I'm going to be following the service manual today. I'll show you every step of the way. I'll time lapse what I can, fill you in on other things that I might not be able to record. So let's do it. So I'm already in a little bit because of the turbo job. Like I said, watch the other video for that. Couple quick easy things first. Battery, disconnect it, 10 millimeter. That's the negative, just get that out of the way. Pop this cover off. Get that out of the way. This is your coil pack, couple of T30s. Pull that, oh, and unplug it. Pull that out of the way. Yeah, which I can't do with one hand. There we go. And pull your spark plugs out. Those are 5/8. You have to take the air box out, which once you disconnect that, pull off this wire, pull out this pipe, and then just pull straight up and it'll come right out. Need to remove this pipe, which goes to the turbocharger, over, around, and into the intake. Need to disconnect the intake from the throttle body. Just going to turn that after I pull off this connector here. Hey, sorry to interrupt. Real quick, there's 2 different ways to do it from this point. There's a way I'm going to show you in the video, which is the way the service manual recommends, and that is completely removing the intake manifold from the vehicle. You can also get away with just loosening the 6 bolts and then pushing the whole thing back. I'll show you here real quick. You see I'm loosening the 6 bolts. These are the ones I'm talking about. I'll show you a little more detail on those later. And then I'm just pushing it back, and it leaves enough space that you can actually get the intake manifold off the head so you can get the head out. So 2 different ways. I will indicate which one is optional if you're going to remove, or if you're not going to remove the intake manifold from the car. I'll just put a little optional or something up here in the corner. Otherwise, if you're going to do it the way the service manual recommends and remove the intake manifold from the vehicle, just follow right along, and that's what we're going to do. All right, back to the video. Next is the evap plug connector. That's our map sensor plug. Next is fuel injector plug. I'm going to try to show you an injector. 4 of these have to come off. We're going to use a screwdriver to reach down in and pull that metal clip back both sides just a little bit. Once you have that clip off, this will pull up. Make sure you grab that clip. That one fell off. I'm just putting these clips all the way back on so that they don't fall off while I'm working on something else. Two more things you need to disconnect. This plug right here, that's the turbocharger wastegate solenoid. And back here is this pipe, which is clipped to the back of the intake. Just disconnect that. Disconnect this line. And then remove it from this bracket. Now we're going over to the fuel lines, fuel rail. Take off that cap. I'm going to put a rag down and relieve the pressure. Ooh. Put the cap back on so I don't lose it. Next is the actual fuel connector. You're going to need the special tools for that. That's just a safety clip. Get that out of the way. Now I have to go find the right collar to push up on that. Disconnect the fuel line. I use these fuel line disconnect tools available at Harbor Freight. This particular line, 3/8. Disconnect this tube, just pinch and pull. Next, we are taking off 6 of the intake bolts. One there, there are 2 right there, 2 right there, and 1 more on the end. It is out. Now you do not have to completely remove this intake. You just disconnect it and set it back so it's out of the way, but I wanted even more space. By doing so, there were a couple of clips in the bottom that were really hard to get to that I had to disconnect there too, but there it is. On to the next. Next up is just some wiring. Get it out of the way. Pretty much everything in here. I'm going to disconnect these plugs. Move this tray. Get this all out so I can get this cover off. Back to the other side. Going to disconnect these coolant lines and this plug for the O2 sensor. Got all the connectors, including the one way down here. The only thing holding this on is this ground wire. So I will be disconnecting that, and then that whole harness should move out of the way. That's everything on this side. Coolant line, all the plugs, the bleed hose, this ground, I just put the bolt back in, and all these wires. Next is the drive belt, which in order to take the drive belt off, you have to pull the engine mount, which is ridiculous, but I'm gonna get the belt off first, and then pull that engine mount. So to do that, I've got an 11mm 6-point, and I'm going on the tensioner right there, and I am turning it clockwise, and you'll see the spring down there. When I do, it relaxes and allows me to get the belt off. We need to remove the engine mount, which are 6 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And of course, to do that, we have to support the engine. So I just grabbed my jack, piece of wood under the oil pan, put pressure on it. I wasn't trying to lift it, just putting pressure. Now, I will take out the engine mount. Next is the water pump pulley. Probably would have been easier to take that out before I took the belt off to hold it in place, but live and learn, right? I'll pop that off real quick. The manual is very specific about 3 bolts to remove. It specifically wants this one, and this outer one underneath. So those are the 3 bolts. One of them is different. This one from down below and this one from up top are the same. And this one is different. Now, we put the engine mount back on. Next is the valve cover. Bunch of 8mm screws all the way around. Need to remove the tire and the wheel well so we can get to the crankshaft. So now we need to set it on top dead center. There is a mark right here, and this has to line up with it, and you need to turn it clockwise to do so. I've got that lined up. So now you have to remove this plug for your special tool. This is a T55 to take that cap off. Be sure when you take this off, you account for that washer. Let me introduce you to the special tools we're using. I picked this up on Amazon. It was relatively inexpensive. We are going to use this and that port I just opened up to set top dead center, and that will keep it from moving around. It should go in pretty easy without binding. If it binds, it means you're not quite there. So you might just move it back and forth a little bit. I'm going to make sure that that is in all the way real quick. I put pressure on it, moved the engine back and forth ever so slightly, and it went all the way in. And you can feel it, how much tolerance there is. So it's right in the center, and the pin is installed. I'm going to remove the camshaft actuator solenoids next. 2 bolts there, 2 bolts there. Once you take the bolts out, keep it parallel. Turn this one counterclockwise, and it comes out. This one, you turn it clockwise, and it comes out. We have to remove the timing chain tensioner plug, which is very difficult to see. It's down in the timing cover. Turn the back right there. That Torx bet. That plug is a T45. Just like the other plug, this also has a washer. This part gets a little complicated. Of our 2 pins we have, we're going to use this one. We're going to put a 21mm wrench on the camshaft, pulling pressure on it. And while holding that pressure, slide this pin in through this hole. It's a pretty snug fit. And you keep working it back and forth until it goes all the way in. Now, it's all the way in, and I have slack on my timing chain. Need to remove the sprocket bolts. Those are 24mm. Same time, we're going to hold it steady with the 21mm wrench. It's time to take off the head bolts. We're gonna follow a pattern and do it a little bit at a time. I'll show you the pattern first. It goes like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We're gonna turn each one 90 degrees, then we're gonna turn each one 180 degrees, and then we'll take them off. Now all these bolts on these Chevys are inverse torques, and up until now with the 8 and the 10 I've been able to sneak them out, but these head bolts are going to be torqued on their tights, so I'm going to actually need to use an inverse torque. They are E12s. Four more bolts to take out. One there, one there, one here, one here. There's one more on this side I didn't see. Underneath this hose. That guy right there. With all those bolts out, the head is now loose and can be removed. Couple of pointers: when you are ready to remove this, lift it up slightly and slide it toward the transmission, because your pin for the timing chain needs to come through this cover before you lift it up. And here is the gasket.
Hi, buddy. Hi, buddy. Horses. You want? I have no pockets. You want your pies? What? You want your pies?
And that's what it looks like with the head gasket off. You can see my problem was this cylinder. That is coolant. That would explain why the exhaust port was so wet. Everything looks okay on the head, but it was clearly leaking. Here's the cylinder head. I'm going to clean this up myself. Get all this gunk off of it, all the oil. This old gasket. I'm just going to measure, see if it's flat. But in order to do that, I want to make sure it's nice and clean. So to clean it, I'm just going to use some red scuffing pad and some brake clean and lightly rub it to get all of that gasket material off. You're allowed 0.05 millimeters lengthwise, here to here, and 0.03 transversely. And this one all measures in spec. So I have my feeler gauge at 0.05. I've got a rough straight edge just for demonstration. And the idea being, if you can stretch it all the way from one side to the other, you shouldn't be able to fit a 0.05 in that gap. Same thing if you go top to bottom, 0.03 shouldn't be able to fit through there, which it doesn't on this one, indicating that it is within tolerance. Hey, sorry to interrupt again. Real quick, you see me measuring and checking and everything seems to be okay. I ended up putting that head back on the car and it did the exact same thing. So I took the head back off, ran it down to the machine shop. He put it on a pressure tester and he found, as I'm going to show you right here, a leak internally between the exhaust side and the coolant side. So that was the root cause of this problem. So I guess what I'm saying is, once you have it off, just take it to a machine shop, have them check it over. It really didn't cost that much and it saves you a lot of headache down the road. So that concludes today's video on how to remove this cylinder head. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, because in our next video I'm going to install the cylinder head back into the engine. You're going to want to check that out. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Be sure to give us a like, and we'll see you next time.